Welcome to Security Sessions, Season 2, Episode 2, as we approach St. Patrick's Day weekend. I'm your host, Dan Tagney, and today I have a very timely episode that I'm excited for you to watch. Our discussion today revolves around how new technology is impacting cybersecurity threats and the evolution of compliance standards around that. I brought with me two familiar faces of the show, Stash Brazuka, founder and CEO of Compyl, Will Klosowski, who's the Director of Cybersecurity and Market Strategy at Stratascale, and our special guest, Carlos Guerrero, who's the Senior Compliance Executive at 360 Advanced. Today, we dive deep into the evolving threats and the drivers that are shaping the future of cybersecurity and compliance. Let's get into it.
Thank you guys for being here today. We have a great topic. I want to dive right into this discussion. And Carlos, I wanted to start with you. When it comes to some of the technology today and kind of current events that take place that shape some of the cybersecurity and compliance makeup, help us understand the mindset of an organization approaching compliance today. How should they be thinking about it to make sure that they're not going through a checkbox exercise?
My opinion is that organizations should be thinking about managing and mitigating risk and limiting liability, and not just necessarily being compliant. I mean, being compliant is an exercise, of course, and traditionally driven by like third-party risk management and those sort of things. But I think with increased scrutiny and regulation and need for assurance, I think that just thinking about compliance as an exercise is it's not going to get you too far, especially as you grow your business.
And there's been a huge growth in this audit readiness space. And Stas, I'm curious from your perspective, 20 years financial service focused in the information security and compliance world. How do you view that world, this quick readiness piece of the audits, of the compliance side, and maybe some of the risks that puts an organization at?
With readiness, right? I mean, readiness has always been part of any audit. You want to generally be prepared before you get audited to understand if you're ready to go. I think, what we've seen certainly in the past, like 5-7 years is, I mean, you had ISO and SOX, but they were mostly reserved for more established organizations that have processes in place. Where we're seeing now is the evolution of the cloud. There's a lot of new technology popping up all the time, and it's a lot easier for organizations to absorb this technology than it ever was before. But companies are looking for some reassurances that these new companies do have processes and technology people in place that can make sure that their data is protected. Unfortunately, that the audit prep industry, if you will, is just not there yet themselves, in my opinion, because we're seeing a lot of companies that are just outgrowing automated checkbox audit prep companies, and they're looking for real security because they're now starting to deal with real customers that have real requirements that want to actually they don't want to just see a SOC 2 report. They want to understand which auditor they actually used, how long the process took, what was involved, who's involved, the scope. There's a lot more scrutiny on this now than there was before as well, especially for the SMBs. And we're starting to see that now. And it's great that people are taking security seriously, and it's great that there is a starting point, but the checkbox solution isn't going to last much longer, in my opinion.
It's interesting you mentioned the the readiness side, and I think we've seen a lot of companies, products all kind of try to simplify that for the SMB market, especially the mid market. On the enterprise side, it's never been like it's all like you do readiness, because if you have the audit and you fail, that costs a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. And probably your job.
Yeah, so it's just part of that process to do the internal readiness assessment, to know that you're going to pass when the actual audit comes there. And the more mature consulting companies will not only assess you properly and set you up, but like, okay, here's all the artifacts you're going to need. Here's your repository. Here's all the this. Let's make you want the auditor here as little as possible, versus like some organizations who just bury the auditor in paperwork and hope they go away, which doesn't work, right? So it's it's an interesting evolution, but I think the readiness happens or it should happen. It needs to happen, right? Regardless of where you're at in an industry or a size perspective. but some people may be able to do it internally, right? And some people may have to source that outward. So for some, most large enterprise organizations, there's a different person who's not their auditor that they pay to do the assessment and the readiness. For smaller businesses, they may have a vCISO type of person who can kind of come in and prep them for it. And then when the actual auditors show up, yeah, I haven't seen much success in this. Hey, here's one place you can go. I mean, I knew somebody that owned a company business product that did that kind of well. Their model made a lot of sense, that they're not in business anymore. But it, it's interesting.
For sure. Carlos, I'm curious from your perspective, with current events shaping compliance standards, but compliance standards not really being able to change overnight. At times a lot of these standards take years to
Sure.
to change. From a organization just kind of leaning on, hey, we're aligned and we were compliant this year. Are they safe? Is there more they should be doing? Should the organization be taking a proactive approach to things that are kind of changing and evolving? How should they think about that?
Well, I think as one, that's a great question, and I think that I'll tell you what happens a lot of times, right? Especially with smaller companies, startups, is that they're marching along, they built their thing, whatever that thing is, and now it's working, and now they're getting clients, and then some business that they want to do business with says, hey, no dice, you're going to have to provide a SOC 2, and so then they go, oh, I need to go, get a SOC 2. Well, how much does that cost? We can't afford that. We need to move faster. And it just kind of creates, kind of back to the whole check the box, or maybe a bit more of a transactional approach. And that's probably not the best way to build your business. I mean, if you build your business and you guys be able to tell the audience even better than me is, if you build from the beginning, not only with security in mind, but with not necessarily compliance, but like aligning with a framework in mind. Have some sort of foundation of a program so that compliance can be an exercise that comes out of that. Then you're built to scale. Otherwise, it's almost always going to be reactionary, and that reactionary compliance is what kind of gets people caught off guard, and they're thinking, I did a SOC 2, shouldn't I be secure? Well, of course
No.
not. But can
No.
we leverage the SOC 2 program to increase our security posture? Yes, we can. And that's a bit of a mindset.
Yeah, I constantly advise and write about that all the time. Like, compliance is a great opportunity for the security, whether it's a CISO with a large team or whether it's an individual who's kind of responsible for all of it. Like, that's your opportunity to actually impact and improve security, because now the business has a reason. You don't have to explain it to them. You don't have to put numbers together necessarily, but you've got an opportunity to make things more secure. And then if you're savvy, you can, find certain requirements that are going to help improve your security posture even more so than being compliant, and maybe make your team's life a little easier as well, right? So I mean, it's a great opportunity for them to take to use that, instead of being like, oh, I've got to do this, to be like, oh, cool, I can use this.
Sure.
For sure. Stas, I'm curious because I know you sit in a unique seat, an entrepreneur yourself, but once a CISO, but now you're kind of working with a lot of CISOs and kind of helping navigating them in their security programs. There's this idea of like continuous compliance that everyone wants to reach, right? Where they have that motion in effect where they feel like they are covered. Compliance security is bubbling up to maybe more of a boardroom conversation than it ever has. How do you think that boardroom conversation and influence is going to affect maybe an organization's compliance program? More people involved, better? How can we think about that?
That is a good question. So the continuous compliance is interesting, right? So there's a lot of companies that are claiming to be doing this, and there's a lot of companies selling this dream. There's very few that are actually doing this in practice. Also, what I've experienced and still experiencing to this day is that when you do actually give a company continuous compliance, they tend to ask for it to be descoped, unless they have the proper team in place to take care of it. Like for
Lots of
example,
people.
yeah, like for example, like there's often an argument about vulnerability scanning and how often it should be run. It's not because there's a cost associated with how often it runs. It's because how much work is going to be generated, then who's actually going to fix it up or fix it once they actually find it, right? So I think it's the same thing with with conversations with the board. You do want to be selective with the type of data that you bring to them. You definitely don't want to take them through like the entire operational risk register, but you do want to take them through enterprise grade risk. And I mean, they're there to make, like, all they really care about is, are we going to lose any customers? Are we going to get fined? That's, are we
Fair
in a
value.
good, yeah, exactly. And like, are we in a good spot or not? That's all they care about. And if we're not, what do we need to do? How much is it going to cost? And how long is it going to take? That's all they care about. The rest is up to up to the security team if there is one. But that is a perfect place to get budget if things are going off the rails. Having said that, you also need someone that's pretty competent to actually have that conversation with the board in the first place. So that even before you get in front of them, that needs to take place.
Will, at what point in your engagement with your clients are you getting engaged to maybe help them have those boardroom conversations, or provide tooling or put something in place to allow them to maybe have some report that allows that conversation to take place a little easier?
Yeah, I mean, it happens. It depends on the CISO, right? And as a broad term, right? The person leading or the team. If the CISO already is kind of, we'll run into, we talk about like technical CISOs versus MBA CISOs, blah, 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 blah. So if they don't have that mindset to what Stas just said, if they are not equipped to go and talk to the board and speak the board's language, then usually that's something we immediately help with. So that's kind of like that initial conversation, and we usually find it out because we're always talking about, hey, what are you doing? What's your roadmap look like? Blah 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 blah. Or how are you getting your budget? Oh, we want to help get your budget. Oh, you need to go to the board and get money, or you need to go to the executive team and get money. Well, we can help you do that. And here's the words you say, and here's how you say that, and here's how you position it, and all of that stuff. On the other side of that, that's not a one-time thing, as Stas just said. You need to have tooling capability. I'm going to say program. Like I always talk about technology needs programs. You need people, processes, and technology. So that even if you have that proactive continual compliance, the benefit there, or any kind of program that's maybe not 24/7, but at least regularly periodic, is going to provide the CISO with data that they need and they can go back and report on, whether they're reporting to their other business units, their other executives they work with, whether they will report back to the board. That gives them continuous communication. And so for those who are working in a more mature environment, that's typically the other side of that, right? So there's the, hey, how do you talk to the board, and how can you help me do that? And then, all right, how do I make sure that I have a roadmap and data and things that I can track and continually show progress, because they need to assess. When you're not going to talk about CVE level vulnerabilities with the board. You're going to talk about, hey, here's where we were yesterday, and here's where we are today, and here's the things we've done, and this is what it means to the bottom line, to our potential risk, to our shareholders, to our team, to employer retention, whatever it may be that they care about.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool. Carlos, we saw COVID, the pandemic. We've seen this growth in ransomware. These current events are eventually going to continue impacting some of these frameworks. I'm curious particularly about AI. And if you have any thought or see any direction that maybe some organizations can take proactively before maybe the actual prescription is laid out in a framework to kind of maybe remain secure.
Well, I think, answer this the best I can. I think it's a good question, and certainly AI is continuing to present new challenges and new opportunities, right? And so I'd say that if you're thinking about this as a mature organization, then I mean, use something to be able to measure. And I mean, it's not perfect, but like NIST has their AI RMF that you can use to do a risk assessment, and ISO just came out with an AI component. So I think just early days, if you have a mature program like we spoke about before, this is just another thing to deal with the vehicle that you've built. Now, if you're need to react to dealing with AI all of a sudden, but you haven't built any sort of foundation of a program, then you're going to be in the same spot that we were talking about earlier. So I still think it comes back to, mentality. And I'll just echo what Will said about, people, process, and technology. I think that in general, security was really enamored with technology for a really long time. And I think the people and process component of that three-legged stool are finally getting, kind of their right place in that trifecta. And I think that's really important.
It's interesting because like you said, the NIST has their framework. ISO has one. ISO has two more coming. Like
Okay.
actually ones that are like what I forget. One's like some are going to be more prescriptive and some are more like advice, type stuff. So, but it's a business conversation, right? I've been having it. Well, everybody's probably been having it, especially if you're in the consulting world. The
Yep.
CISOs are asking, hey, what do I need to do to make sure I'm secure? And it's great to say, hey, we can do a risk assessment around that, but what's going to happen is we're going to sit down and we're going to talk to you and we're like, how are you using AI? What data are you putting into it? What are you expecting to get out of it? Where is it at? What compliance requirements do you have regarding that type of data? What are you concerned about, right? Are you putting your IP in there, right? Do you have your own GPT version or is it something else, right? So much like everything else in security, to kind of complete the thought you had there is we started in technology, but it's really a business conversation and it's really
That's
a
right.
risk-based conversation today. And people getting caught up in or forgetting about that can create problems.
That's for sure. That's very interesting. Question for the three of you. Stas, I'm going to start with you and we'll pass it around the horn to Will and then Carlos. If you had to think about one current framework that maybe is in more need than the others to be updated,
Oh, here we go.
what framework do you think could use a little attention?
Well, that's a really good question.
And hold on.
They've all
Hold
recently
on.
been. Yeah.
Let's pause for a sec. I should have probably given you guys a little time to think. Well, I'll edit this and I'll ask you the question.
Well, I
if
say
you guys want to say.
because it is a good question. I just kind of spoke out of turn, but I think it's a really good question.
Yeah, I mean, literally, almost all of them have just been updated or about to be updated within like, I mean, the NIST 2.0 is the last one that we're waiting on. PCI was last or 2 years ago now. ISO, sorry, PCI was last year. ISO is 2 years ago. NIST is coming up. CIS is constantly being updated. I mean, if you asked me this like a year ago, would have had a different answer, but I don't think it's so much. I mean, I think the better question is when is the next update going to be? Because the ISO one took 10 years to update. NIST took 5 years. I mean, 6 now. And PCI, I don't even know how long PCI took. So I think
Well, they're on a standard cadence, or they used to be. It's been a while since I've been at QSA a long time ago, but it used to be every 3 years. They would just do it.
I can't remember. I think something has changed there. I can't remember that either. But so to answer your question, I would actually say SOC. The AI CPA would probably need to. I mean, they haven't updated it since 2017, and a lot of stuff has changed. I also think that the SOC. I think Carlos could probably add some color to this, but they need to stop letting people be so selective about the type of controls that they're running and what's included and what or like excluded. Because the level of dishonesty in some of the SOC reports that I'm seeing, even for SOC 1 and SOC 2, is just like unbelievable. And this is going back to the checklist conversation, but like if they what we don't want to happen is that people lose all trust and faith in these reports, and then we're back to square one and having to rebuild something from scratch because this has taken a long time to get here. And like I would say AICPA 2017 needs to be updated.
Very cool. Will, how about you? What are you thinking over there?
I've got a smart ass answer. It's probably
Hey,
CMMC. So
well, they just updated, right? They actually, but they loosened it, right? They
yeah, well,
yeah,
that's kind of the answer. Like, I was my original answer was going to be I don't know. It's probably something in Fed or pub sector though.
yeah,
That probably because there's probably some STIG or DISA or some regulation that's still completely out of date, that doesn't even apply anymore, that people have to still audit against. That's I think so. Generally speaking, like it's interesting. I have to look at the PCI because I don't know, but like I liked the idea that they had a cadence of every 3 years we look at this versus NIST and ISO who don't necessarily have that. So I think as long as they're continually work, I mean that actually is probably the reason CSF became popular because it's digestible,
Mhm.
but also it was the new thing for a long time because ISO was just kind of stagnant. It was still very useful, but it's so
Yeah,
that's my smart ass answer.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
like it. I wouldn't expect anything else. And Carlos, what about you? What do you think?
I'm going to come, full circle and say SOC 2 as well. And I think I think the reason that Stas said with the update, is that's very legitimate. And I think that can be legitimate for most frameworks, especially with the, evolving threat landscape, how it is evolved so quickly. But I think what's also interesting about the SOC 2 is the, is the lack of trust, right? I mean, I think like if there's no trust, then it's not very valuable. And I think, you know 3 or 4 years ago, as we saw, a lot of automation platforms come into the marketplace and really, um, commoditize that market. Then that created certain challenges too. I think to where you're getting some of these reports, that by smaller CPA firms that they're just for the amount of money they're charging, there's no way they can put the time in to build a quality report,
No way.
So I think that's also a problem as well. And I think that's being reflected in the marketplace.
Can I ask a question that's going to probably give us 10 more minutes of conversation?
Please.
Yes. Let's do
Okay,
it.
because both Stas and you guys are both way. I'm not a SOC 2, SOC 1 person. Like that's not my bailiwick. Are like, is it something that we have today that is just default? So if I'm a third party risk, like you said, that's exactly what happens. SMB has a big client and they're like, here's all the things that you have, they get their Archer download or whatever it is and say, answer all these questions or show me your SOC 2.
Yeah.
And that's, it's probably, I'm not going to get into the details of how or why that got created or anything, but like, is it ever going to get to the point where that, like, to me it's just a default, but like you said, we continue to question it. It actually doesn't show that you're doing the right things. It just shows that the things you are doing are the things you have written down, right? So like, is there going to be a point where SOC changes or where these businesses are doing something different? Because is just having in their third party risk program, if they have, oh, all my vendors have a SOC 2, does that like help them with their insurance? Does that clear, that doesn't actually clear them of any risk, does it? It just gives them a warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, that's right. It does give them just a warm and fuzzy. I mean, there's already companies that are doing like things like security centers where you can like log into the portal and see like the company in real time. It's all, it's all like bullshit.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure it
it,
is.
it
Yeah,
yeah, and
smoke and mirrors.
it's the only way that we're going to get real assurance on this, and I'm positive that this is coming within by 2030. This will be in place. Like there will be mandates on certain companies. We're already seeing it on the critical infrastructure, but there will be certain mandates where real-time reporting, continuous compliance will be pushed into a central government body that will be responsible for looking after it, and then
Sure.
they'll be able to be telling their customers, hey, like they're fine or like they're at this grade or whatever it is. That's the only real way that we're going to get it. Relying on SOC 2 reports that are a year out, that are produced by questionable auditors. They you get breached, no one's going to be like, oh, well, let's take a look at their SOC report, like that's just not going to happen. I think the industry is changing. I think I'm hoping we start going in the right direction again. Yeah, like right now that it's just warm and fuzzies.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the I mean, this is not a commercial for my company, but are quality firms that are taking a risk-based approach and that are cybersecurity focused and are doing all those things so that, you know, they are more impactful. And the readers of those reports that are used to reading reports, you know, can say, hey, this is a quality report, right? It's not
Absolutely.
complete garbage. I mean, and
Yeah.
that is a difference. But I think, you know, your points, you know, well taken. And also, you know, it's just an opinion. Not me. There's no real certification or anything like that. And that's why, like, High Trust, you know, came out with, you know, their two smaller certifications now, the
The
I1 and
E1.
the
Yeah.
E1.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And the whole reason for them doing that is they wanted to compete with, you know, the SOC 2. But the only way that works is if all that work they've done in healthcare, they can do it in all these other industries in order to, you know, propagate their solution and get it in contracts, right?
Yeah, but it's funny though, right? Because with High Trust, I mean, one, it's a racket, but all of these, they're all rackets. But with High Trust, like, I mean, it's so cost prohibitive that you know, it's
It's
insane.
difficult. It's
Yeah,
challenging. It
yeah,
is, but
yeah.
it is more rigorous and it
Oh
is
no,
more threat adaptive.
I'm actually
And
I'm all for it.
yeah,
Like, I actually think it's a really well done framework. And I think it adds a lot of value, and the customers that we have that do have it are really, you know, they are very secure. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, it's um, I forgot my other point. Anyways, uh,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
um,
All good.
I think some of this is actually just coming full circle, right? Because I think, you know, one of the first questions I had asked Carlos was about like mindset and
Mm,
some of the challenges that from my experience, what I've seen when it comes to this like SOC 2 in particular is the mindset of that organization pursuing that, um, especially the first time they're pursuing that, when they're in that startup or growth stage, their mindset is not really focused on security. They're
mhm,
they're using that SOC 2 as a sales enablement tool.
yeah.
yeah,
So from the start, that organization is not understanding really the value that a SOC 2 can provide them and why it's actually important. So it's really just interesting, Will, that you asked that question, and we've kind of come full circle because if the mindset can shift, then I think some of these organizations, some of these audit mills, can actually provide a better service to these organizations and insights. So when there are new things and trends and current events coming down the pipe, they're actually, as we've talked about, in a better
yeah,
position to handle them versus just being
yeah,
reactionary.
for sure.
Wow, we
Yeah.
solved some problems today.
Hey,
I don't know about solved, but
yeah.
Oh, we opened the band-aids.
we identified.
We found where the
Identified the problems. Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Well, listen,
Step one.
I do appreciate all three of you today and your time. This
Yeah.
was a great conversation. And until next time.
That was always
Good.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.